Hey there, rulers, DMO73 here, and we have our first showdown with the new extension rule. I have myself playing K1 plus Faultgold versus Dan Rowland of CCG Prime playing Grimm plus Faultgold. Let's go ahead and jump right in.
This session brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, CCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for products, and FoulLibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists.
As well as our guest lecturer members King Pearlshine, Vite Ramen, Mognite, and Darren Noblock.
Class is in session.
So here we go. Apologies for the little bit of camera shakiness here. There's also going to be a couple cuts just because of how we were editing this on the day. We wanted to make sure we got this right. We have a showdown between K1 and Faultgold plus Grimm and Faultgold. Arguably, the K1 deck doesn't get to use Faultgold as optimally as it did want to before the ban list because it was using Faultgold to help support to get Sealed One-Eyed Dragon, but Sealed One-Eye's banned. That being said, we still have a lot of really good cards we can grab with Faultgold, and Grimm is using Faultgold to grab Neverend in particular. It can also grab Guardian Dragon, which is another card that Dan just in general really likes to use, so there is a few search targets for both decks. Dan starting with the Bahamut side face up for some reason, but both decks making use of that wonderful new extension ruler card so that we can have two rulers from Grimm Cluster tag together. And the K1 deck obviously trying to use stealth and standby cards, paying only one to make those go face down. There's some pretty cool interactions between old stealth cards and new kind of big creatures, which we'll talk about here in a little bit once the deck gets started. And then the kind of whole idea of the Grimm deck is you can use Telefairy Tale. You can use Neverend plus Telefairy Tale to grab any Resonator out of your deck because Telefairy Tale doesn't have a cost restriction. It just wants it to be a fairy tale. And with Neverend, you can make every res card in your deck a fairy tale, which is very, very cool. So you get to do some pretty neat will cheating stuff there. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. Game one with K1 being on the play. Let's see how this goes. Overall, just the overall excitement that we have with the ability to be able to start using these Grimm rulers again in a cool, unique way is just very, very exciting. And so we wanted to start out our feature matches for this new set, showing you, hey, just a little taste of what you can do and the kind of experimentation you can do using this new extension ruler card. First turn Black Silence, first turn Moonray or Moonshade. Nothing else really going to happen here from either deck. At that point, we're going to go ahead and go for a Faultgold search, and Dan slams down the lure right here just to stop me from getting the search off. We're okay with that. Again, our deck strategy isn't super reliant on the Faultgold search because we don't have that Sealed One-Eyed anymore. It's just kind of helps to deck thin a little bit, and there are some dragons that we can grab. Ultimately, we're just going to go ahead and call Stone Pass, and we're going to let Dan go ahead and search out. He's probably going to go grab that Neverend. So Neverend setting up here. Obviously, it's going to take him a bit to be able to get to the protection side, but we're really not looking forward to that. We're just trying to play a Neverend, immediately tap to give everything Fairy Tale, and then go for a Telefairy Tale to hit something huge, something like a Magic Stone Golem or a Garion or a Kusanagi Motoko. Like, there's a lot of like really insane resonators that you can grab if this card resolves. Seeing a Wanderer Moon here. The other nice thing is that if you do get the Fairy Tale active as well, you can use Grimm to play any Resonator in your hand for any attribute. So that's kind of nice. You can kind of bypass the cost of them a little bit, which is a cool thing. We have Percival coming down here to help him kind of dig a little bit deeper. Obviously, this is primarily to help us find Telefairy Tale. See, there is that Kusanagi Motoko. Only target there being a Keep the Faith to grab and put into the hand. And then we're just going to swing in for one, and we say, that is fine. We will take 100 damage. Not a problem. Going to go ahead and try to search before draw on our turn. The main reason why we search first is because the dragons in this deck are not things we want to draw. Like, we want to draw other cards, and so it's always better to search out a dragon, thin the deck, make it so it's less likely to happen to be drawn, and then we can draw for turn. Got to go ahead and pay 2 here. Make a token using Starfall, which is very, very helpful. Starfall being a dragon, so we're making use of Dark Alice in this list as well. So being able to search Starfall as a single copy to always be able to turn on that like pay 1 draw 4 line is very, very helpful. And we haven't seen enough of our stealth stuff yet, or our standby stuff yet, so we're gonna go ahead and try to go in for this Dark Alice now. Especially since we have the Starfall token to just try to draw 3 cards, and see if we can dig into one of our standby shenanigans. Dan decides to respond here using coin to play his own Dark Alice. Probably trying to dig in for an answer, trying to find like a Lorite. Ultimately say, no, that's fine. He does see that Lorite there, sacrifices 1 Lorite, has to finish out the resolution, draw, probably might discard Spanish. Oh no, does decide to discard a Bastet, and then we do see that Lorite come down to start the Dark Alice, and we go, hey, you know what? We've got something to respond to your Lorite. We've got the Killua here to kind of protect the Dark Alice resolution. That's fine. So we're gonna get to dig here. Draw an extra card because we sacrificed off the token, off of the Starfall, probably gets us into something we need. And at that point in time, we do find a standby to put face down. There are 3 cards that this deck is in the main board using for the standby area, meaning Executioner, Pale Savior, and Nighttime Raiders. These are the kind of 3 main cards that we use, and ultimately they're all designed to kind of cheat Will in a sense, and you'll kind of see what I mean once they pop up on the screen to get resolved. Out comes that Guardian Dragon. See another Call Stone. We're 1 stone away from being able to go into the Telefairy Tale line because we don't have any way to pump it up. To do it in 1 turn would require 4 will. See a Horn of the Sacred Beast come down here to be able to recycle. And we are going to see this Guardian Dragon come down, it seems like. First, we're going to go in for 100 damage. Say that's fine. We're going to take that 100 damage here. And at that point in time, because we've taken damage, we're going to go ahead and grab Pale Savior. This card is sick. We have a lot of really good resonators to be able to cheat in off of this now, as opposed to when it was first printed back in the Moonlit Savior in Alice Cluster. We took damage from anything our opponent controlled, and so we get to put a light resonator of total cost 4 or less from our hand straight into the field. So it's a 3 cost that we paid 1 for to put face down, and it gets us a 4 cost. So just like the amount of insane will value you get from that is kind of nuts. Some other notables are really good in terms of like Eldorado Pearl Shrine or stuff like that. Ultimately, we're putting in a Nidhogg. The main reason why the first version of this deck, in terms of the main deck, is playing a lot of high cost, good value black or white resonators, so that you kind of, whichever one of the standby cards you hit with, you're going to have the most, like the highest chance of having something in your hand to use. So we're going to get to remove 2 cards in his hand from the game, and as long as Nidhogg is on the field, he's not going to be able to keep it. He's not going to be able to get those cards back, which is nice for us because Nidhogg's a 4-drop, and so a lot of decks are playing attack order right now, and so being a higher cost resonator, it's not going to do anything to him, which is very, very nice. So down comes that Guardian Dragon. Because he has 2 in hand, but we're okay with that. We're going to search out another dragon. Getting rid of the Never End, at least one of the Never Ends is very helpful here. Searching out another Corpse Eater Dragon. Corpse Eater Dragon is really good for this deck in general because it also is, so one, it's a great thing to hit off of nighttime raiders, but also it has use in our hand in the form of we can search it off Bahamut, pay 1 black, and then force our opponent to discard. So if you have like excess will in the upkeep, it suddenly becomes like, hey, before recovery, discard a bunch of cards. So you can kind of clear your opponent's hand, which is really nice, especially when you consider we're also using Nidhogg's and other things that force discard too. You see we have a nighttime raiders. We just don't have a way to be able to hurt him right now. Our best way to be able to ping our opponent hasn't shown up yet, which is a little unfortunate. So we're gonna go ahead and pay 2. Oh, thinking about it. Double checking what's in the graveyard here. We want to be able to put cards face down and have some will for interaction. The biggest problem is that we don't have any kind of instant speed way to hit him, which is how Nighttime Raiders is kind of abused in this deck. We drew a lot of cards, but did not see the card that we needed. If we can force him to discard 2 cards again with like Corpse Eater Dragon, then we can like, you know, use other Corpse Eater Dragons to force him down to 0 cards. The one advantage also being for the Grimm deck with Never End is that if you can tap Never End to give everything Fairy Tale, you can pitch any card in your hand to get any Resonator in your hand to turn it into any other Resonator in your deck. So the toolboxy nature of it is pretty high. Just because we know his hand doesn't have any form of interaction outside of Keep the Faith to grab back the Lorite, we're going to go ahead and play Rusty. This is another one of those cards that, again, it's a black or white Resonator, so whichever one of our great standby spells we're hitting has the advantage of being able to cheat in. And we're going to steal that Guardian Dragon. Like, that's going to ramp us a stone. It's going to do a lot of cool stuff. And we're going to get a threat of his off the board and steal it over to our side, which feels great. We're going to see a Keep the Faith come down. We let the Keep the Faith resolve. When the Lorite comes back, though, we're going to go ahead and do the Killua. Enters Big Dino Girl in the Big City to stop the enter effect of the Lorite so that we can go ahead and resolve. Rusty killed something. We get Guardian Dragon. Guardian Dragon gets us a stone. This feels great, and now Nidhogg can swing in the air for 1200. And there's not really much on Dan's field that's threatening the Nidhogg right now, so we're kind of in a good spot. He will be able to search out another Never End. This is a key point for us to note, is that, you know, we're tapped out, and he's going into that turn. We feel pretty good about the fact that, like, we know there's not a Telefairy Tale in hand. So it feels like, well, this is the play line. Unless he suddenly happens to top deck into a Telefairy Tale, we're in good shape. Unfortunately, though, as you just saw, he top decks into Telefairy Tale. So he's going to be able to go in for the line here, which is pretty neat. Callstone with Grimm. Paying 200 to get the Never End down, and then down comes Telefairy Tale. The one weakness of doing this line, this kind of back-to-back in one single turn, though, is the fact that it does tap both of your rulers, like Call Stone, play Never End, tap Never End. So we don't have any way to protect the Never End on the crackback. So Telefairy Tale is going to come in here. Gets him any Resonator he wants from the deck. He's going to grab Ultra Magic Stone Golem. So this man paid 4 will and got 10 will worth of cards. Kills all my stuff. He gets his 2 cards back, which feels great. Sets him up for a nice clean board here. And then swings in for 600 damage to say, okay, we've got some damage done here. That feels great. Mr. Recovery, Call Stone. Got a lot of will to play with, and this deck does get to a point where it doesn't need a lot of will to get things started, and therefore has a lot of will to be able to protect itself. Putting 2 cards face down into the standby area, and then finally seeing that Ethereal Princess come down here. She is one of the best cards in this deck for turning on Nighttime Raiders in a way that is just absolutely gross. And then we're going to go ahead and pass the turn. Ping him for 2 during our turn, of course, to take the free damage. Ping him for 2. And then on his turn, we're going to go ahead and ping him again, which is going to double trigger these 2 Nighttime Raiders, meaning that we get to put 2 5-cost or less Resonators into the field. The first one's going to be Garion. The second one is going to be another Rusty. Rusty's then going to get to kill the Ultra Magic Stone Golem. We're going to steal it. Ultra Magic Stone Golem's then going to blow up his entire board. So now he lost all of his 1-drops. I've got all of his stuff. Or he lost his whole field. He can't cast any more 1-drops. I have his whole board. Yeah, it's pretty good. Nighttime Raiders is the biggest problem with Nighttime Raiders for the longest time was that we didn't have a really good way to kind of trigger it. Ethereal Princess is such a way to be able to trigger it in a way that is very, very helpful. Doing a little bit of finagling here. Completely forgot to do the Percival to foresee a little bit. Kind of debating how we're going to let Dan resolve the foresee here. Yeah, we're going to let him do it, which is good for him. The optimum time, obviously, to be able to do this line that I just did would be after his draw, but before his recovery, just to make sure that the Percival, like even banishing the Percival wouldn't really help him much because the foresee wouldn't change like what he was about to draw. The question is, though, at this point in time, how many cards in Dan's hands are 1-drops? We know that we know one of them's Never End. We know one of them is the Shrine. All kinds of stuff. Just a little bit of a clip there. We kind of jumped ahead because we had to pause for a second after the Guardian Dragon comes down. He starts to go play the Never End, and we go, Dan, you can't. You're under Garion, so that's just gonna not happen. And at that point in time, so sorry about the little jump cut there, but just we had to step away for a second and then kind of come back, and the Guardian Dragon got cast. Staring down this board, though, I mean, there's so much damage on board. The Ultra Magic Stone Golem has Pierce. He's only at 1,800. He's going to be at 1,600 for the turn because of Ethereal Princess. I can just continue to ping. So at that point in time, Dan scoops it up, and we go into game 2. Game 2 here, nice strong start there from Dan. Does have Telefairy Tail in hand, does ship an Ultra Magic Stone Golem and get another one, which is really unfortunate. Obviously, you want those cards to be in the deck. Does have a Dark Alice, though, to at least help him draw some cards, which is good. And we do see a first turn putting a card face down, so automatically just trying to figure out which one to put there. The optimum first turn play for this deck is obviously being Nighttime Raiders, because if next turn I get an Ethereal Princess, we can just trigger it right away, because standbys have to wait. They have summoning sickness in the sense that they can't be flipped the same turn you put them face down. Stealth doesn't have that same concern. However, knowing the fact that Dan does play Guardian Dragon, there is something to be said about putting Executioner face down on one, so that if Dan taps out to play Executioner, or Dan taps out to play Guardian Dragon, we can just immediately kill it and not make it a problem. We're going to go ahead and search up that Corpse Eater Dragon just to get it out of the way. Move to Recovery, call Stone with Kaguya. Putting 2 more cards face down. We said, look, we bypassed turn 1. That's all we needed. We didn't have to worry about which one we put face down. Let's go ahead and put 2 more face down here, and just say we're good to go. Dan doing his search for Bahamut. See a Guardian Dragon getting searched, most likely getting cast, which is okay because we have, again, Executioner. And now the nice thing about Executioner versus Guardian Dragon is the fact that we now have a Resonator who can swing, to potentially trigger Nighttime Raiders for our advantage as well. Using coin and 1, down comes the Guardian Dragon as expected, gets him in that extra stone. You say that is fine. Executioner comes in here, kills the Guardian Dragon because it just cares about the cost of the Resonator. And now we have a Resonator to be able to swing and trigger that Nighttime Raiders that we very clearly put face down. Trying to get a Garion coming in here. Ultimately, we did do draw then search, which I think was a mistake. we're going to go ahead and grab the Starfall. Just nice to be able to have these tech one of dragons to search for to help finagle the hand. Going into Calling Stone. And at this point in time, before we take any other actions, so we have the most space to be able to interact, we're going to go for Swing with the Executioner. Dan throwing in that Dark Alice Rabbit Princess to try to serve as a blocker, as well as help kind of sculpt his hand a bit. Pitching a Lars. Interesting to see Lars in this deck, unlike the, I suppose with the fact that it can take all the damage that you would take is very nice. Does go to block. And we do have, unfortunately, we made some changes to the deck right before recording, and we didn't have the cards on hand, but what we're using right there is the black-white Lumia to remove it from the game, which then means we hit, which then means Nighttime Raiders gets to trigger, which then means we have a Garion. So it feels very good against his deck, especially being able to stop the Never End, like just make that line pretty uncastable. Feels very, very good. So, and then taking him down to 2,000 life and saying, look, we're putting you on a clock, like right away. Ultimately, though, this does kind of benefit Dan that he ended up drawing into an Ultra Magic Stone Golem, because if he didn't, like that's at this point in time his only early-ish way to answer this Garion, because everything else is like reliant on a 1-drop to be good. So he does have at least some outs, but, you know, as it is in some decks, you know, when Garion resolves, you're just in for a bad time. You do see he has 3 different stones, so it does cost him a full 3 will. If he had hit a same stone, he would not have been able to cast this, but because he hit a unique stone, he can pay 3 to play a little Ultra Magic Stone Golem, paying 200, and that is going to kill both Garion and the Executioner, which means he now gets to start casting 1-drops again. So did find a way to make the early cheated out Garion not be as impactful, but did tap him fairly heavily on will. Making a couple extra tokens using Starfall, keeping in mind that you do need to do each activation individually because you have to resolve the reveal, then resolve the reveal again with Starfall, but we're shortcutting a little bit because Dan didn't have anything to stop it. Searching out for another Corpse Eater Dragon here. Again, just more deck thinning and keeping the deck's hand, the hand of the deck filled with, you know, potential resources for Nighttime Raiders. You see an attack order. Doesn't help us very much here against Ultra Magic Stone Golem. Calling another stone, hitting a Moonshade, paying 3. Going for a Rusty to try to kill the Ultra Magic Stone Golem. We do see a Dark Alice here, which is going to sacrifice them at Ultra Magic Stone Golem and draw him some cards. This serves the purpose. We like dealing with a 2020 Pierce, so it's not something I wanted to struggle with. So sure, I don't get to take it on my end, but he also doesn't get to swing with it. So the advantage kind of works out. The problem is, though, he is at a point where since he has Telefairy Tail, he's at 5 will. So now he can, like, 1 will protected go for the Never End Telefairy Tail any Resonator he wants line, but it will be also protected because he has the additional stone. Pays 200 here, even though he doesn't need to. He could just use one of the other stones instead because of the ability to play Fairy Tales for any attribute. So brings himself down to 16, and then goes to use the activation of Never End. We start to go to respond, and then we realize this effect resolves and stuff gets Fairy Tale anyway. It's not dependent on Never End being on field to give everything Fairy Tale, so I'd rather respond to whatever he's going to Telefairy Tail into. So we do see Telefairy Tail here, gets to grab any Resonator he wants. At this point in time, the obvious choice is that Kusanagi Motoko. It's a 7/7, or it's a 14/14 with every single keyword except Eternal. You know, Swiftness, Precision, Flying, Barrier Drain, Precision, Pierce. Or it doesn't have Pierce, but he's very, very large, and he can go in to try to make some swings here and start to beat me to death, as well as regain the life that was dealt with him earlier. So goes up to 3,000, takes out the Rusty, and it's very, very hard for me to deal with that card. Mainly because of the barrier. I'm going to go ahead and search out again. Hit a Blazer. The reason why we're playing this Blazer in this list is because there are lines where if you use this Alice Origins Blazer against an order deck, you can just lock them out of ordering for the rest of the game. And so because of the fact that we can do it with Nighttime Raiders, and we can also do it with Ethereal, search it out with Blazer, it felt like a worth it as a tech one-up for the Faultgold's utility searches. Other thing to note is that it is a fire resonator, so it actually does give us a way to Judgment Bahamut. So, it's not completely worthless to be able to try to play Faultgold. We're going to see that Lumia come down. We're going to see Attack Order come down to get rid of this. And the main reason why is we're going for a one way to try to remove something that has barrier, which is Starfall. A little bit of a quick edit here as we had to take care of something quick. Dan rip, and then it's going to slam down that Lorite he has in hand to stop me from being able to get that. Dan kind of got ahead of himself in terms of letting me resolve that, which is why you see me put a card back on top of the deck. I'm going to regain the Starfall token in a second. Dan was a little bit confused about exactly how Starfall worked for killing something, and so you banish the token as part of the resolution of Starfall, so I get to have both tokens. So did not successfully kill the Kusanagi Motoko, which is a drag, because I think if that Kusanagi Motoko died, the match is probably over, because just the value that I'm going to get over time is probably just going to outpace him, with his best resonators being the possibility of a second Garian and everything else, with his best resonator at that point, I think, being Ultra Magic Stone Golem or maybe his own Garian. But even then, we have things that don't care about being one drops. Down comes the Never End, which kind of really, again, paying life for it, even though he doesn't need to. Keeping in mind, again, Grimm can pay for Fairy Tales with any color. Seeing a Guardian Dragon come down here. And in comes a Cheshire Cat. Another Grimm era card. Pretty classic Grimm card. Just to do a little digging, and then passes the turn. Probably going to swing with the Kusanagi to at least take off the Starfall, although I think you should just start swinging face. You don't really care about Starfall now that it's on board, and you're going to gain so much life, so you might as well just go face. I'm going to block it, of course, but it's a little bit better than just choosing to attack the Resonator, because, I don't know, maybe I have something. The only reason to maybe consider not going face in terms of if I have a Pale Savior, so that might be, part of the contention of, I'm not going to let you have a chance to trigger Pale Savior here. I'd rather just keep your board cleared and start building up a huge mass of life, which is a fair point against this deck, because he knows he do have a standby down, and because I didn't double trigger Nighttime Raiders, it means that probably is a Pale Savior, so it's a pretty good read. Keep in mind that you can technically put any card face down in the standby area. You just have to pay 2 for it, or in the case of Kaguya, pay 1. So could just be an absolute bluff. Before recovery, we're going to see another one of those Lumias. Again, apologies for the proxies. Happens when you make last-minute deck changes before doing a recording. Staring down this board, do have a Nidhogg to help with Pale Savior, but really running out of options to be able to get this Kusanagi Motoko off the board. if he play, all Dan has to do is not play another Ultra Magic Stone Golem, and I'm pretty sure he wins this game, purely because like I don't have a way to kill that Motoko outside of getting a Garion out. Now, if I do have a Nighttime Raiders face down, there's a world where like I get 200 damage on him successfully on my turn. That cheats in a Garion. The Garion can then kill the Kusanagi Motoko, and we can go from there. So there are some lines. It's just very, very tricky. Persephone comes down here to try to kill the Guardian Dragon. We're going to see a Keep the Faith in response, probably trying to come back and get this Never End that I killed before. We say that is fine, not going to try to stop him. Just to try to rip some cards out of his hands here, we're going to go ahead and pitch both of those Corpse Eater Dragons to force him to discard 2 cards. Get a Lorite and a Percival out of his hand. In comes the Never End and chooses to not protect it, which I think is a very strange choice. He could, he absolutely has more than 10 to be able to protect, but ultimately, though, does let the Persephone kill it. I think it was more to keep the flyer on field, but that seems maybe just a little bit suboptimal. We are going to go for a activation of Never End to try to get everything out there, which point in time we're going to see a Garion to try to respond to kill the Never End. Lorite comes down here. Kiloa comes down to prevent the Lorite activation effect. We really just want this Never End to be dead. Ultimately, though, I don't think it's going to super matter because now we've lost the Garion, so we don't really have any good ways to be able to get a good line out of it. And it was an activation of Never End during his turn, so everything is still a fairy tale. Or maybe not. Yeah, I think it was before draw on his turn we saw the activation. Yep. So we do have access to everything being a fairy tale. Oh, nope. We have to go for a Keep the Faith line to get the Never End back. Then we can turn everything into a fairy tale. Oof, and rough. We saw that addition to be able to buy back the Never End as well. Buy back 1-drop stuff from the graveyard. Being fully tapped out, not really needing to worry about Pale Savior. And again, there's no sealed One-Eyed Dragon, so we're just going to go ahead and go in for making everything a fairy tale. In comes the Telefairy Tale here to go grab anything you want. At this point in time, the best course of grabbing is probably a Garion of his own to just fully lock me out. It doesn't stop Pale Savior because Pale Savior is a 3-drop. There is a world where he maybe grabs the perfect Loki, but Garion is just lethal this turn because of where my life total is at. Especially since I'm tapped out, and all he has to do would be to answer whatever the Pale Savior brings into the field, which is, at this point in time, I think the best thing is Rusty doesn't kill anything because everything's fairy tale and you've got 10, and Nidhogg doesn't help us here either because it's smaller than everything and his hand's already pretty stacked. So everything he wanted to resolve is already on field, so losing 2 cards isn't a big deal, at which point in time he can just like use the other one of the flying heavy hitters that both have precision to kill the Nidhogg and get the cards back. It doesn't really matter. We do go ahead and see him just go ahead and cast the Hidden History. This lets him buy back one-drop Resonators. Swings in with there. We get a Pale Savior, which gets us getting to pick a couple cards out of his hand. I think he only had 2 cards left in hand, so we'll get rid of both of them with Nidhogg. Swings at me for 14. We block with the Nidhogg, so we at least buy ourselves a turn to see what our next top deck is. And for good measure, he goes ahead and plays a Cheshire Cat down just to see what is to set up his next draw here, and then pass his turn. We open up, we draw, see what our draw is, go nope, and we scoop it and go to game 3. Pretty advantageous in this matchup, though, for K1 to go second. The optimum play line for this deck is, again, to hit a Darkness Stone on one, coin to put down a Nighttime Raiders, and then play Ethereal Princess. This lets us do a line where if our opponent's tapped out, we can just go straight into a Garion on their turn 1.5 before they even draw for turn, which is kind of insane. You know, it's akin to like the powerhouse swing that used to be with like back with Carlina. We can do the same kind of thing that we were doing there, but just with 2 Grimm era rulers. Hitting that Magic Stone of Moonshade, and then we see a pass. For some reason having a Magic Stone underneath there. And we do see a coin to put a card face down, and we do see an Ethereal Princess come down here. So feeling very likely like it's going to be able to get us exactly what we need, which is seeing what Dan's gonna do, especially if he's gonna slam his pretty traditional first turn Guardian Dragon. If he slams that, he's in for a world of hurt, because we're just gonna respond to the enter effect and be like, hey, you're tapped out, take 200 damage, and here's a Gary. And then also go into my turn with you not having any will, which is pretty gross. Do see the Guardian Dragon get searched up, which means the Guardian Dragon's probably going to come down. Now, the main reason to wait, because we know he's playing Lorite, the main reason to wait until in his main phase to try to go for this line is because if we do it during his recovery, he might have the Lorite to stop the activation of the Ethereal Princess, which means we burned it, and then he can kind of go to his main phase and do whatever he wants. This way, we're forcing him to pay 200, you know, we're letting him tap himself out here to get this Guardian Dragon, and then we're safe to go ahead and just search up, grab what we want, ping him for 2, cheat out a Garion, go into our turn and set up for there. And we're also just like pinging him to death with the Ethereal Princess. Like, that is not chump damage when you consider, you know, the triggers of it happening here. Nighttime Raiders is going to go ahead and get triggered. This is going to then get us a Garion. We get to go into our turn, ping him down to 32 just off of the Ethereal Princess. He'll be at 30. You know, like we have him on a 2-turn clock at this point, which is rough for him when he's also staring down something that stops him from having 1-drops. It's just really not a good position for him to be in. Swing in at the Guardian Dragon just to get it out the way. Paying for another Ethereal Princess. This will also really help accelerate the clock. Now 600, and then we can ping him for another 400 to take him down to 24. The reason why it's 600 is because Ethereal Princess gets boosted for every other Ethereal I control, and so now they're 6/6s, right? 6/6s that do 200 damage, so they're each 8/8s, and I get to ping him for 400 damage every single turn as long as these are both on the field. So we're pretty much telling him, like, have a another Ultra Magic Stone Golem or lose. And even now, because of the fact that he didn't hit a unique stone, even Ultra Magic Stone Golem can't help him here, because he only controls 2 unique stones, which means Ultra Magic Stone Golem only has its cost reduced by 4, so it would cost 5 to cast, and he's only got 4 will. So that, calling that stone, unfortunately, he doesn't even have Golem in hand, but having that stone, hitting that stone, unfortunately, kind of just locks him out of the game. He just really doesn't have much to be able to deal with the fact that he's going to be taking at least 800 damage just from the Ethereal Princesses. And, you know, it's just going to go downhill from there. Because we'll go to my turn. At the end of this turn, we're going to ping him for 4. Go to my turn, we're going to ping him for 4. That puts him to 16. The Ethereal Princess is going to do another 12. And then we go to his turn and ping him for another 4. So, like, we have lethal without even swinging with the Garion if he can't get a blocker onto the field. We do see another Guardian Dragon come down here to at least get him something to block with. Unfortunately, you did see we have that Lumia in hand as well, so like we can just play that and remove it, but we're waiting to see what else he's going to try to do here. pinging for the 400. Starfall Dragon. The end of the turn. Make a token. Gonna ping him for 4 just to start him out, to go down to 16. Seeing if we can get him down to 10 with just the ethereal princesses. He says, that's fine, I'll take it. Swinging for another 6. He kind of has to take it, because if he doesn't take it, then if he does block it, then the Garion kills him, and at that point in time, he's just dead. So that is the match. The line goes through. You can see kind of the craziness that is these ethereal princesses of K1. This was a really fun first take with the extension rule. Hope you guys like it. Tech profiles will be up later this week. And until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.